Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Nadir. Good morning. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thank you so much for taking your time out for this.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, Nadir. Nadir, before the podcast, I spent some time looking up for some information about you, and I spent some time on your LinkedIn page. And it said, you have a business which is college planning and transition, right? And you've been running it for over a decade now.
Mhm.
And before I talk about this particular business you started, how did you get into education, teaching? Was this the plan all along, or how did the transition happen?
Very interesting question. So, just to set you the proper context, that by training from my high school, I was a pre-engineering major, and I did my undergraduate degree in civil engineering, and then I came to the United States in 1987, did my graduate school in structural engineering. But somehow, since 1978, when I was in high school, I was graduating high school, I was affiliated with, back home in Karachi, Pakistan, just like in India, we have a concept of getting a tutor. So I was very good in mathematics, physics, and chemistry, all those science subjects. So I funded my own undergrad studies by tutoring various students. So I've been affiliated directly or indirectly with students over 40 years. So I taught many students back home at that, and then when I came here doing my graduate school, I was going to IIT for my graduate studies in structural engineering. I was teaching freshmen and sophomore as well as my part-time work at IIT. And after graduation, in graduate studies, I did my CSS and worked for government at the county level for almost 33 years as a structural engineer, primarily in the area
Wow.
of bridges. So I used to design bridges, inspect bridges. So, basically bridges were my babies. And then I have two boys. They are all, professional now. Both are professional. But when they were growing up, as I taught many students back home and over the years, I used to help my kids as well, and in the community as well. So when it came to their college prep, I was guiding them. I was carving their program. I was taking their interest in gauging that what talents they in-house within themselves. Because I personally believe always that nature has wired all of us in certain way, and rather than rewiring ourselves, we need to enhance and nurture our wiring. So my both kids, being a strong science background, my both kids were okay in science subjects, but they didn't exhibit that passion for science, and they turn out to be both in business major. So,
Right.
but both had some unique talents along with the business. So I carve out their program in a way that both of them went to university and did their dual major. So they did the double degree. My older one was a debate champion in state of Illinois, gold medalist. So he was a good orator, good writer, and he has a business skill set. So he did double major from U of I Champaign. And my younger one was a car whiz. So he did one degree in automotive program and then one in business management. And so my wife actually, when both of them were successful, my wife said that you didn't only send them to these programs, high caliber program in United States for their respective schools, but at the same time you saved quite a bit money because I carved their program in such a way that I sent first 2 years to the community college. And by doing that, I almost saved $150 to $200,000 because
Wow.
schools are very expensive here. So
Right.
a good school is 50 plus a year, 50K. So Mike, where I live in Chicago, I have a community college which is the second largest community college in the nation after Orange County,
Right.
30,000 students, and they have a variety of programs. So I carved out all the classes which would transfer exactly to their top tier program as a junior transfer rather than spending 2 years in the outside state or somewhere and paying the dorms and everything and high expensive. Because, if you look at it, the curriculum itself, the first 2 years is a general ed. Every school child has to go through the general education, which includes social
Right.
sciences, mathematics, English, speech, communication, all those things. So those courses are completely transferable, provided you did certain due diligence in picking the right classes. And my both kids, I sent them to the honors program because each community college has an honors program in which they have like 20, 25 students and they have a one-on-one personal attention. So rather than sitting in the freshman year, a big university, 450 kids in chemistry class, you are sitting here at the community college in the honors program, 25 kids with one PhD professor, right? So the teacher pupil
Right.
ratio is a great asset. So my wife said that all these things, they came out really excellent. They got all the credits and they went straight from the community college as a junior transfer. And doing so, my wife said that why don't you do something as for other kids, and that gave me a thought-provoking idea to align some business plan or something that I said, well, I need to get first thing to know out that how to incorporate my business, what name I should come up with. And then I started doing all this legwork, and finally I incorporated myself on November 2nd, 2013 with state of Illinois as my LLC. So basically I operate from state of Illinois, but I can help any kids within the United States. Sometimes kids have called me from Pakistan for guidance, and they ended up in University of Waterloo in Canada with a certain major which they didn't have any opportunity to get into in Pakistan
Right.
because I believe that each and every kid is unique. And some of the fields which we, at least in Pakistan, we don't have that opportunity for the kids to pursue that. And sometimes here within our society here in the United States or Canada, we have so many fields that sometimes, kids are baffled that what to go with, right? Which one to pick.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's confusing. Not having enough choices is a problem. Having too many choices is a problem.
Right. Right, Nadir. Great stuff. As a fellow subcontinent guy, having known the culture here, how the parents would want their kids to take up one of medicine or engineering or something like that. And especially you being a civil engineer yourself, structural engineer and all that, allowing your kids to kind of pursue business and stuff like that, that's very interesting. And not only that, as you said, you've carved out a very specific programs, a path for them to kind of pursue and stuff like that. So great stuff. um Nadir,
And
you
that's
said
basically what I do actually. Not a regular type of guidance counselor or career planner. I'm very I'm thinking out of the box basically because
right, right,
my plans are for the kids to cater them to carve out based on their needs and their choices and their options and their talent.
right, got it. uh, Being, having spent a chunk of your life building bridges and everything surrounding that, when you first thought about doing something in this, following the success of whatever you did, in your kids' life after your wife, kind of mentioned that you could do something like this. How did you start off by, what was the positioning that you did for yourself? Because you don't have experience in the similar domain for you to
Mhm.
show, except what you've done for your kids. So
Right.
how did you approach from a marketing perspective?
So it's basically my theory, because right now people who knew me from back home, so I can tell you that some of the students I have had here in the United States, it's a second generation whose parents were taught by me back home in early 80s.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
so my marketing tool is word of mouth, basically reference.
Right. Right.
So because I don't spend too much on marketing, to be honest with you, and uh, honestly, this business is not my bread and butter. This is my
Right.
passion, so I
Right.
take it from totally different angle. uh, that I have sometimes more than 5 kids or 10 kids, and I don't go after the volume, but
Right.
whoever kids I dealt with, I have a 100% results. So I'm on one-on-one type of person. And sometimes if they are locally here in Chicagoland area, I meet them in person whenever they need me during my
Right.
contract time, or I Zoom, I email through via email, through texting. So I'm constantly in touch with them. So once, I mean, they've got their problem, that becomes my problem. So that's how I deal with it.
Got it, Nadir. Along with what you do in terms of strategizing how they need to approach their college admissions, do you also train people, students, with their SAT and ACTs?
I gave them the strategies, but I don't actually tutor them.
Right.
Because I believe that teaching and dealing with the kids, I feel that SAT or ACT or LSAT or GRE or any GMAT, any standardized test, uh, you know, it gives you strategies how to operate, how to optimize your potential. You
Right.
can increase few numbers here and there by taking those classes, but you cannot change whole a lot. And I have had
Right.
students, you'll be surprised that I was the big proponent of saying that this is not the pure gauging mechanism of SAT or ACT for high schoolers to justify that whether they'll be successful in career or not. And I've been telling this thing for over 20 years. And sometimes, here my colleagues were laughing at me that, you sometimes don't make sense. And because I was telling them based on my real experiences with the kids on the ground,
Right.
to tell you that, I have had kids who were 2.6 or 2.8 GPA with ACT 16 out of 36, but they are working in the corporate world in Fortune 100 companies in the world right now.
Right. Right.
So sometimes, kids are not good test takers, these standardized tests. I'm dealing with one kid right now, very brilliant kid, very brilliant, 4.6 GPA on 4 scale. But if you translate that GPA into the standardized testing where she should be, she's not there, but doesn't mean that, she cannot be successful,
Right. Right.
right? So this is one criteria. That's what I believe, that, one can gauge a student, but this is not the sole criteria to gauge someone for their career success.
Got it, Nadir. And you said, you're not, you think out of the box. You're not the run of the mill college counselor admission guy sort of thing.
No.
What is it that you do differently? I know that you also focus on saving money for parents, but
Right.
is there anything beyond that? What is it that you do differently?
So, for instance, a student comes up to me, let's say a student is a 3.5 GPA, right?
Right.
Let's say that student gets, because I've had student 2.6 GPA and I've had student 4.6 GPA. So I have a variety of, and if you take this 2.6, this is a 2008 story. This kid, 2008 8-story of 2.6 GPA. High schooler counselor told him that, I don't know, kid, what you're going to do. You are a lost case. Now, remember that, based on the performance, when I met this kid, and it took me quite few sittings with him to gauge his interest, gauge his personality, to know who that person is. And I
Right.
found out over the time of few sittings that he was a kinesthetic learner. Now, kinesthetic
Right.
learner are hands-on kids. They are not theory, just like me. They will get mathematics like this, or physics like this, or chemistry like this, right? So he was a hands-on kid, and his needs were not addressed actually in the high school, because
Right.
high school gauges kids normally either on percentile ranking, GPA, extracurricular activities, ACT or SAT or PSAT. These are the different markers they gauge students based on. Now, if the student is a kinesthetic learner or special type of learning qualities that student bears, and if school doesn't offer that opportunity for that kid, of course that this kid is not going to excel, and the
Yeah.
colors are not going to show in his performance, right? So this kid was one of them, right? He was such a brilliant kid in his domain that when I was talking to him, he said that, I work on my mom's Camry and I do a lot of work. So I thought that maybe he's changing the oil and stuff like that, minor stuff. But when he told me that, he replaced the entire suspension, entire exhaust system, and he was doing some experiments running an engine on vegetable oil. So he was a
Wow.
very inquisitive type of person, and he has a special talent. So I realized that this kid is out of the blue, and this kid can be a star in a right field if I placed him and give him the right opportunity. And that's what exactly I did. So he's working for Audi of North America right now.
Wow. Okay.
So
Great.
and the reason I'm saying this story to you, that I don't deal with one size fits all.
Right. Right. Got it,
Okay.
Nadir. And you said, the sittings that you have with a kid, and
Mhm.
it took some time for you to gauge. So, how exactly do you have a method to gauge, or is it just conversations? What is
Just
it
a
like?
conversation. Just a conversation. And first litmus test is their performance. I look at
Right.
their either high school grade sheet or mark sheet, their different grades, and I dive into the different grades a little bit further breakdown. So sometimes I've seen that a kid gets B minus or B plus or C minus. There must be a reason why C minus, right? So I said that then don't show me the grade. Give me the breakdown. Breakdown of detail. Breakdown means how did you do in assignments? How did you do in projects? How did you do in pop-up quiz? How did you do in 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 final exam? How did you do in announced quizzes? And I see the silver lining in there, and I see some loose spots in there. So most of the time I've come across that students don't do, who are at the borderline of the GPA, they don't do well in the pop quiz, because the problem with our system, our society, that's what I felt when I was growing up as a child and myself as a student. I never ever gone to school just to get the good grades. My first objective was that whatever I am learning, is learning taking place? What am I learning for? So right now, last almost 8 years, I'm studying and I'm doing my extra work as my passion in medical field. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
studying medicine for healthcare reasons, right? So that it doesn't mean that I have to go and get the degree as a MD doctor or become a medical doctor, but there's enough information available, authentic information, authentic knowledge, which I need to siphon according to my need and cater it. So now information is frivolous nowadays. But how you manage that information, that's a key part. Okay.
Right.
So that's what I basically believe in, that, having a conversation first, that what kid wants, what triggers him or her, what is the point that that person connects to. Everybody has different hobbies, different likes and dislikes. So, and I haven't come across a unique method or testing by a counselor that can read people's wishes and brain. Yeah, there are some tests, but the test which some of my students took in the counselor in high school, it didn't reflect what they were telling me.
Right. Got it, Nadir. And you said, for your kids, you had them do community college for 2 years and then they had
Mhm.
a junior transfer. Is that the path that almost all your students take up?
No, no. That's a very good point you brought it up. So when I see the student, I try to see the one concept here is, and I've seen quite enough, that if a student is good student in a high school, very good GPA, but remember that an average high school in the United States has about 4,500 kids, 4,000 to 4,500 kids.
Right.
And if you have excelled in your GPA in that pool of students, and you take that student in a bigger ocean, just like a big 10 university, now you are competing with the brains.
Right.
Okay. So it means that if somebody got 3.8 or 3.9 or even 4 GPA in high school, that doesn't give you enough evidence that you are going to be able to fit in the curve with the brains in which the entire United States is getting from their top high school student at UC Berkeley or any Ivy League school. So you have to fit in that curve to be able to get the good GPA as a freshman. And sometimes what happens that you don't try to be that good enough to fit in that curve, and your grades falters in the
Right.
freshman
Right.
year. And sometimes people, due to frustration, they said, oh, well, this is not the major I want to do, let's change the major. Right.
Right.
So I've seen quite a few issues with many kids that has gone through. So what I do, that I gauge and I try to underwrite the risk, that based on the admitted profile of a student and based on the admitted profile of a university where your students is intending to go, do they match? What is the probability that your student is going to glitter over there or will be under pressure? Because remember that at the end of the day, we want our kids to be happy,
Right.
successful, and satisfied.
Got it, Nadir.
So I
Nadir,
try to
you
match
shared.
the school.
Right. Right. You shared the story that happened in 2008, the student who's now working in Audi, North America, right? You said when
Mhm.
you had a few sittings, you gauged that the student is a kinesthetic learner, and our schooling system doesn't address uh, the needs of such learners, right? Do you think the solution for these situations is simply to identify their interest and lead them into it? Because eventually, even if learning of your interest is chosen, the methodology is not going to meet your needs as a
Mhm.
kinesthetic learner, right?
Mhm.
So, can that gap be offset by at least putting the student in an area of their interest?
Actually, there is a provision in high school system, but sometimes it's overlooked.
Right,
So if you look at any high school system in the United States, each high school student has to take some core courses, and there is an
right,
elective list of electives, bunch of electives available at their disposal during the 4 years. But sometimes, students are so mesmerized by the parents or vice versa, that they are after honors classes or core classes, that they don't think enough that what they have others as an elective to choose from. So my recommendation to most of the parents and kids are that when they enter in freshman, try to get at least one or two electives to begin with each semester to gauge their interest. And electives are there to gauge one's interest. So for instance, if a student is saying in the 8th grade after graduation of middle school that I want to be a doctor, let's say, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to be a business major. So
Right.
accordingly, what their wish list is, try to give them at least one elective per semester. So if somebody
Right.
wants to go into doctor, let them take the genetics, let them take the physiology in the early as elective. So there are a bunch of electives which high school curriculum guide offers you to pick it from, right?
Right.
And if you gauge that interest and see that whether you like it or not, right? That's a first litmus test. By no means that it's a final litmus test.
Right.
But if somebody says that, oh, this is not what I meant, because in theory, in fantasy world that, I want to become so and so, looks good. But when, of course, you have to go through a 4-year program, or even in med school, you have to go 7-year program and then postgraduate diploma and all that. So if you don't fly with the good colors, in your first litmus test, chances are very slim to none that you're going to enjoy that field.
Right.
Right? So I strongly recommend students to take those electives as a first litmus test, that let's solidify. And what it does, that it saves a lot of frustration, a lot of time, because you waste a lot of time in not only time but money as well in changing majors. Right now, if you know the stats, that in United States student debt is over $1 trillion.
Right.
Right? Because a lot of kids, the majors they pick after, this is the stat that 60% of the freshmen drop their major as a sophomore, that this is not what they intended to do. And sometimes,
Right.
after graduation, they change their major, that, this is not what I intended to do. They completely reverse. So now you have piled up for one degree some student debt, and then piled up another. I don't care who pays, but some resources are being wasted. Whether parents are paying, or whether it's coming as a student loan, or it's coming as a scholarship, whatever. But the
Right.
resource is being wasted.
Right. Right. Nadir, now, whatever you've done so far, students would have come to you at a certain point. But ideally, if you have to kind of prefer, when should they start this whole process for planning for admissions?
Ideally, I prefer that students come to me as a freshman before they start the freshman. So I plan everything for their next 4 years. That's what I do. But sometimes students comes as a senior to me. Sometimes they didn't get accepted at their university of their choice.
Right.
There's no time limit, for me. But it makes things a little bit difficult time-wise to carve everything and start in a direction where I want to take them. Right? So if you were to ask me that, what is the optimized way of doing it, as a freshman?
Yeah. Got it. Got it, Nadir. You said, you plan out everything that involves, that kind of leads up to that mission. Now, what are the things that make up a proper planning? What aspects? For example, interest, the student's interest and passion is one thing. What are the
Right.
other things that kind of, make it happen?
So it means that, if a person is taking the core classes, and if person is swaying towards a certain career, make sure that the student has taken enough electives as a first gauge to check the litmus test. Not only litmus test, but it's going to show on the transcript when he or she applies to the university as a major, that, the student has established a role and shown an interest in that particular field. That's why that person has taken enough electives. That's number one. Now, electives,
Right.
you are taking elective, like let's say economics as elective, or, and then if you excel in that elective at an earlier year, freshman as a sophomore or a sophomore, then load it up in junior, that elective as an AP class, right? So if you get A or B in AP, you get a college credit. So I've had a
Right.
student, who shaved 4-year degree in 3 years because he had too many AP classes,
Right.
right? So everything is looking for some time and planning ahead, because people don't fail because they don't know what to do. People fail because it's lack of planning. Because planning requires time frame, time horizon, right? The only thing we cannot reverse is the clock.
Right. Right. Nadir, and one of the final topics, right, is the scores of SAT or ACT or any standardized test that is being made optional by universities now. How do you see this? Is is it a good thing? I'm sure you're going to say it's a good thing because you've maintained that you thought the standardized tests do not really reflect the students' academics. So, how do you see this?
I'm not a strong proponent of dropping it out completely. It's a good thing.
Okay.
So it's a very I would say that it's one of the tool that school needs to look at it, and students and parents needs to look at it as a success for the career, but not the sole one criteria it can be judged,
Right.
because 4 years hard work, a student cannot get a good score for, because I've seen some students are very nervous or exhibits anxiety in this
Right.
test, and this is not a test which gauges only your knowledge, that how much you know the curriculum, but it's a speed test. Because I've taken 3-day exam here as a licensed structural engineer. I know 24-hour exam is a nerve-wracking test. Just like a medical doctor takes the license for MD, practicing the doctor. So those tests are designed to, give you a nerve-wracking feeling, because they don't want to flood the market and all that thing. So this test by itself, the standardized test, is a speed test. And sometimes I've been talking to students over the years that they say, well, I ran out of time. It's a time management test, right? So
Right.
I asked them that, did you practice, or did you simulated the test at home?
Right.
I strongly recommend. So this is one of the strategy I tell my student that, simulate that test at home as a practice test. Put a time clock in front of you. Practice over and over. Now, when you time yourself for this test, it means that you have to exactly create the same environment as if you are taking the real test. It's not like
Right.
10 minutes you solve 2 problems and say, well, let me get some coffee, or let me take a break, or no. You have to create similar environment under the stress that you are taking actual test. And that's how with practice, you're going to beat the clock. Because sometimes I hear from my student that, oh, I ran out of time, and then at the end, I had to guess. Now think about it mathematically. Statistically, if I have 5 problems left out and I ran out of time, I'm going to guess. And if I have 4 choices, it's 1/4 probability that I'm going to hit the right one, right?
Yeah.
Now, even though if I have taken the time I knew that problem very well, I knew the answer very well, but since I didn't have a time to read it, I guessed it.
Right.
So I'm going to guess it wrong, right? So this is what one of the strategies said, that, if you are stuck on a problem, just move on, come back, circle it, come back. And if you have to guess it at the last, because you don't want to guess the problem which you are certain about.
Yeah.
right? So I would say that this is one of the marker, but I'm happy to see that some of the schools are realizing this and giving students opportunity to excel and succeed. Because I've read recently some stories that uh, that some students got admitted to the top tier schools, not because of their standardized test, but because of their GPA. So schools are getting aware, and slowly and steadily this awareness is spreading over.
Got it, Nadir. So, if you have to say, if you have to kind of recommend to students whether to take the test or not, would you change that answer depending upon the student? Or would you say, irrespective of whatever it is, just take the test? If it's not great, don't disclose it. Is that how you'd approach?
Yeah, I would say that take the test, but take it
Right,
seriously, not just for the taking of the test.
right, right,
Prepare yourself, because see, a junior who takes the test, whether that's SAT or ACT, whatever they have gone through the curriculum up to the junior year, it should be reflective in that, right? They are not asking you something at university level. If a student has gone through algebra and trigonometry, they are not asking you AP calculus in that, you know so they are not asking you something advanced which you haven't come across,
right.
right? It's only how you tackle that problem, how your nervousness is acting, how much your anxiety is reflecting in the test. That's going to make the score either bad, how much you are taking the stress under control. Accordingly, your numbers are going to reflect. So I
Got it,
strongly
Nadir.
recommend students to take it, but be give a good shot at it, couple of attempts, and still if you don't get a good score, then explain them, because most of the schools, they have in their application that if you want to discuss anything on your part which you want to explain to the admission committee, then be honest, be candid there, that this is my shortcoming, because we as a humans, we all have our shortcomings, we are not perfect,
Right, right.
right? So what is my strength, and what are my weaknesses? We should know, right? And we should capitalize on our strength and work on our weaknesses. And I think schools are getting more aware of this issue. That's why some of the schools are not requiring to submit it.
Got it, Nadir. Nadir, my final question, as a admission counselor coach, or an admissions coach, one of your stakeholders is your students, and the other side of your business is your knowledge about the colleges that are, the programs that are, and stuff like that. So, how much time do you spend in learning the new programs that come up, the kind of college, the campus? How important is that as an admissions coach?
It is important. Uh, I normally guide my student not based on the schools, based on the top tier program. So for instance, if somebody tells me that I want to go to Harvard, that would be my next question, but what you are passionate about, what you want to do. So
Right,
based on their interest, I pick the programs which are top tier, top 5 or top 10, and then we make sure that their interest or their profiling of their GPA and everything is aligned with that school as the admitted profile.
right.
Make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Got another. So, it's just the top tier programs that you're bothered about. It's not the campus, the college, where it's located, and stuff like that. Those things aren't something that bother you.
Hello?
Nadir, can you hear me? Am I back?
Yeah, you are back now.
Okay, sorry. There was some disruption. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah. So based on their, I was saying that based on their performance of high school and based
Right,
on their interest, which program they want to major in, I try to align those schools with them. And based on the career placement, I also look at the career placement of those schools, that in the last
right.
6 months, how the graduates were placed in different corporations.
Got it, Nadir. Nadir, just one lighter question to end the podcast. You said when you started off, you don't do much of marketing, it's just word of mouth for you. And sometimes people from Pakistan, your home country, also, reach out to you. Are your students that you work with are mostly South Asians, or, it's a mix?
It's a mix, but mostly South Asians. Yeah.
Got it. Do they specifically approach you with requests like, to save them, how to see if money can be saved? Is that one of the important criteria that you're being approached with?
I give them the option. Actually, I explain them how FAFSA works. I
Right,
don't fill out the applications for them, but
right,
I gave them the strategies that how to optimize them. So my main mantra is that how to optimize your uh, child's education. Get the best possible thing out of what's available out there at the least possible cost. Now, sometimes I will tell you that sometimes, even though not cost from the cost perspective, but sometimes major perspective, that whatever I recommend, sometimes parents overrule me in the past, but they realize down the line that whatever I was telling was sensible to begin with.
got it, Nadir. And one final question, especially for the students and parents living in the subcontinent in the South Asia. When it comes to admissions, what is it that you would ask them to do that is not currently happening in the schooling life of a child, which would help them with their admissions in the US?
I think mostly what I have seen, and this is my uh, this is I could be very on the extreme end, but
Right,
I personally, this is me coming from my heart, that
right,
the education and learning should be taken at the core rather than grade driven. Unfortunately, we are living in a society where everything is grade driven or GPA driven.
right,
And sometimes we are all at fault. We are all at some kind of a some share the responsibility, even as an educator, as a teacher, as a parent. Think about when child comes home. First question normally parents ask, how much did you get homework? Did you get any homework? Right?
right,
How many parents ask that, what did you learn today?
right,
Did you learn
right,
something new? Let's talk about it. Because I believe that homework should be the last piece of the puzzle of learning, not the first piece.
right,
So sometimes I see, when I talk to students, that how you are studying at home when you come to school. Tell me, entire day. So I see mostly that the learning is not taking place as it should be, but it's driven towards either prepping for the quiz or prepping for the exam or prepping for the project or prepping for the pop quiz or prepping for the assignment. But I personally believe that, if you go after learning the subject matter, grades and everything will follow you. You don't
right,
have to chase the grades.
right, Nadir. Well said. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and very organic in your approach. You've kept things very simple, the way I see it. And thank you so much for your time, Nadir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.